Okay. So good evening. This is the League of Women Voters of Broward County. And tonight for our general meeting, we have Robyn Donaldson with us. She is the co-founder of Path to Peace, a team of trauma-informed yoga educators, healing artists, and psychotherapists who offer trainings and programs in mental health education, trauma-informed care, community building, and restorative justice. Some of her clients have included Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight Action, Black Voter Matters, and Movement for Black Lives, and the Minneapolis-based Race in America project. Robyn is the former campaign staffer for Senator Jon Ossoff in Georgia, but she was also the Broward County Regional Director for Organizing for America and a former campaign staffer for President Barack Obama's 2008 campaign here in Florida. So she is familiar with our county. Some people don't always know where Broward County is, but she certainly does know. She's also the founder of the digital grassroots Facebook groups, the Team Stacey Abrams and Team Georgia Blue. And that has over 25,000 members. Robyn is originally from the Chicago suburbs. We were just talking about that because I'm from downstate Illinois, but she currently resides in Atlanta, Georgia. She's a former lawyer and a proud HBCU graduate from Florida A&M University. Go Rattlers. So Robyn, I will turn this over to you and let you begin. If you want to share your screen, just go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you to Monica and Linda who invited me here and made sure I had all the details so I could join you tonight. And my mom, she's on here as well. She's involved in her League of Women's Voters in Illinois as part of their executive board. And I also want to say hi to my cousin Angela, who's also in Florida. So I have a lot of love for Florida. My father, he was originally from there, and I have a lot of family still there in Florida and a lot of friends, especially in the political world in Broward County. So I'm always happy to give back and support anything happening in Broward and in the state. So what I've been doing, this is a presentation that I created in order to thank a lot of our volunteers in the grassroots space after the runoffs. And from there, someone, who was it? Rick, who is the president of the Broward County Democrats, he invited me to the DEC, their executive board meeting, and I presented this to them. And then from there, various clubs invited me to share this, various clubs in Broward and Palm Beach County. So I've just been sharing this information. You know, I know Broward is a very unique place to organize and to, do any kind of political work, in Florida, as well. So if there's something that applies to Florida, that's great. If something does not apply to Florida, don't worry about it. But it's really more to just share with people, what we were doing on the grassroots level and some of the things that were happening here in Georgia around the 2020 and 2021 campaigns, and just to inspire and give people ideas, and you can take it and use it, however you see fit. So that was kind of the whole way, the reason all of this came into being. So I'm going to share my screen, and I will walk us through this presentation. And then I also have some links that I will share in the chat afterwards. So you can always just, click on the links and then, read them later, or just bookmark various links. And some of the links will support what I'm talking about during the presentation. And then afterwards, if you have any questions or feedback or comments, I'm here to answer them. And you can always reach me by email afterwards if we don't get to everything today. So this is just a photo of all the voters throughout Georgia. It's a very diverse coalition and group that came together to win, to flip the state blue for President Biden and Vice President Harris, and to win the 2 Senate seats. So I just wanted to highlight and show some of the voters who posted their photos in our Facebook group. And I always start off with this quote by Margaret Mead: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." It's really true. David Plouffe, President Obama's former campaign manager and the author of A Citizen's Guide to Beating Trump, he released a book right before the 2020 election cycle. And he said, Georgia, believe it or not, may be a top target as well. It would take a Herculean effort by volunteers in the state to put together a winning coalition. And then he said, you don't have to wait for the campaign. And so that was kind of, I started there because that's exactly what happened. I was here and I didn't see any Facebook groups for Joe Biden in Georgia. And so I started one and I kept kind of waiting for someone else to do it. The campaign wasn't on the ground. And that kind of snowballed into everything that I did going forward. And I always believed that we could flip Georgia based on the work that Stacey Abrams and her team and supporters were able to accomplish in 2018. But a lot of people did not believe that we could do this, and even leading all the way up to election day. So again, thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. So we did have a lot of very pivotal figures from Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms here in Atlanta. She was an early President Biden supporter, but very early on, before many people were endorsing. Insay Ufat at the bottom left-hand corner. She is the executive director of the New Georgia Project, and they were responsible for registering hundreds of thousands of voters over the last several years, which laid the groundwork. And then to the far right, Latasha Brown, one of the founders of Black Voters Matter. They were instrumental in our success here in Georgia. And I know they're also on the ground in Florida. And then, of course, Stacey Abrams and Congressman John Lewis and the Georgia Democrats. It was just, a nice, flow of wonderful, strong leaders that we had that really helped us to be able to win. And then, of course, we have our two candidates from the runoff, and most of this will be centered around the runoff. U.S. Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, first Black African-American senator from the state of Georgia, and then Senator John Ossoff, first Jewish senator from the state of Georgia. So we had, two historic candidates, and they're phenomenal people, and it was just perfect. A lot of mainstream media was saying that they were weak candidates. I never understood that, but they were, they both brought, very unique gifts to this race, and then they worked very well together, supporting one another and crisscrossing the state in order for us to win. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the numbers. We had almost 4.5 million voters come out for the Georgia runoff. And one of the main things takeaways I always like to share, 100,000 of those voters who came out in the runoff to vote, they did not vote in the November presidential election. So, I know a lot of times we're hyper focused on, voter turnout and who's voting, but there are hundreds of thousands of people who do not vote, and we have to go and find them and motivate them to come out to the polls. So out of that, 100,000 voters who did not vote. So let me back it up. So the fact that, we had this crazy President Trump at the time, and, we had President Biden and Vice President Harris, for whatever reason, that did not motivate those 100,000 people to come out and vote. But something did in between November and then January of that year for the runoffs. So most of the voter surges came from Southwest Georgia, and the Black Belt of Georgia had the largest voter surges. And so that's a lot of rural communities and rural areas. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but they had an increase in turnout. And then there was a huge early voting surge among Black voters, and half of that 100,000 voters who didn't vote in November, but did vote for the January runoff for Senate, half of them, 50,000 of them were Black voters. So again, I'm just trying to drive the point home, is that there's always people out there that are not participating in the process, and we have to find them and expand the electorate, and that it is possible. So there was also a change in the margins from November 2020 to the runoff January 5th. So the majority of Hispanic and Latinx voters increased by 8 points from November to the runoff. And the majority of Black voters, it went up by 3 points. In general, around across Georgia, the margin increased by 2 points, rural areas, suburban areas by 2 points, and urban areas by 1 point. And white voters with less college increased by 0.9 points, and that came from Fair Fight. So again, it's there. Just a lot of these people who did show up, who didn't vote in the presidential election, a lot of them had never voted in a Senate election either, but they still came out and they showed up for that runoff race. So one of the key components was increasing the youth vote, because at the time of once President Biden won the general election, there was maybe about 4 or 5 weeks between when he was declared the winner, and then when the voter registration deadline it was December 7th for the runoff. And so as long as young people were turning 18 by January 5th, they could vote. So there was a huge rush to register the 17-year-olds who were going to be turning 18 by January 5th. And then they'd be eligible to vote. So there were all kind of voter, and of course, we're dealing with the pandemic as well, but the number of young people who were 17 years old turning 18 before the runoff was 23,000 17-year-olds. So that was, the target. And of course, the fact that we had Senator John Ossoff, a younger candidate, that was a real draw for, college students and a lot of young people. Also, the bottom left-hand corner, the photo of the ladies wearing the Vote Warnock t-shirts. They're part of the women's NBA basketball team here in Atlanta, the Dream. And what ended up happening is over the summer, there were obviously a lot of protests, after George Floyd was murdered, and the WNBA team here in Atlanta, they were protesting and, speaking out in support of Black Voters Matter. And Kelly Loeffler, who was the Republican candidate running against Senator Warnock, she was one of the part owners of the WNBA team here in Atlanta. So she came out and made a statement and called Black Lives Matter terrorists and, all these disparaging comments. And so it was a huge moment for most of the WNBA team, if not all of them. They showed up to practice and they had their Vote Warnock t-shirts on. And that was like a real, watershed moment, I would say. And got a lot of press and media, and that was a real bold move for them to stand up against one of the owners of the team, that they're employed by. So the youth vote, like I said, increased, and there was also an aggressive move to recruit Black men voters. So for instance, Rick Hart, he's now the president of the Georgia Young Democrats, and he was involved with youth coordination for Senator Warnock's team. And so there was a real effort to have Black men speaking to other Black men about issues that impacted them, and a lot of listening tours and things of that nature, because there was this, myth that Black men don't vote, or they're not voting at the levels that Black women do. But actually, when you look at all of the different demographics and groups, Black men, I think, are number 2 next to Black women as far as who's coming out to vote the most in force. So that was a really smart thing that they did on the Warnock team. And they also, traveled around to a lot of the rural communities and, did a lot of events there. And a lot of these rural towns and communities said that they had never had the Democratic Party or candidates show up, maybe not the party, but they never had candidates show up to their town, at all. in recent years. So that was a huge, even if they didn't win those rural areas, they didn't do as bad, as maybe people have done in the past. And so one of the things I again, wanted to really kind of focus on, John Ossoff, Senator Ossoff, he did something that had never been done before. He created a community mobilizing program. It was called the Community Mobilizing Program. And that was the program that I was involved with, helping to create and run for the runoffs. And so it was something that he came up with along with a few other people, but it had never been done in politics, to our knowledge, and definitely not anytime recently. And so the idea around the community mobilizing program was to reach people, and not just reach people, but hire people into the campaign, not just paying them, a little bit of money to turn out the vote, but we hired people who could just only focus on mobilizing their networks. So it was, if you've heard of peer-to-peer, contact or relational organizing, that's what we use. So the idea was to find people who had never worked on a campaign before, who were not involved in politics and didn't really know too much about politics, let alone working on campaigns. And so we hired, even if we had people apply who maybe had been on a campaign before or were involved in politics, we would not hire those people. They were funneled into other volunteer efforts. But we hired community mobilizers who, had no involvement in politics, and we paid them as if they were part of the staff. So they, got a great pay for their time. And their focus was to mobilize their networks by using an app called Reach. And so the Reach app was used, it was used, here and there with various campaigns, but it was never used in this specific way. And so the Reach app, the community mobilizer would be hired by us. And I think there were 12,000 applicants who applied to be part of this program. And out of those 12,000, we hired, I think it was 2,700 community mobilizers, and we hired them all the way up until the last day of early voting. So, and we had community mobilizers in all 159 counties throughout the state. So there was representation in every county. And so it was important because a lot of times, there were certain counties maybe who didn't have anybody from the campaign on the ground, but the community mobilizer would be, was there on the ground. So what we did was we would hire them and we would immediately train them, and then we would get them onto the app. And so they weren't organizers, they were just mobilizers. So there definitely is a difference because sometimes people put a lot of investment into organizing, like for instance, Bernie Sanders, I feel like that was a situation where, there was a lot of investment maybe in organizing, but then something happened where they weren't able to translate that into mobilizing the vote, and mobilizing is actually getting people, to the polls. So, so the community mobilizer, once they were trained by us, they would download the app, and then the app would download, would sync with their phone and download their contacts from their phone into the app. And then that person would be tasked with getting, everybody in their network that they could out to vote, obviously if they were on our side, getting them out to vote. And so the way the app worked, the app was connected with the voter file in Georgia. So if a person had not voted yet, the app would tell you, that your friend has not voted. And then if a person did go vote, maybe in the next day or two, the app would then update, and then it would show that the person had voted. So that was the first step. The second step would be if you could get somebody in your network to vote, let's say it's your sister, a community mobilizer could get their sister to vote, then the app would show who else in that sister's household is a registered voter and has not voted yet. So, if my sister was able to vote, but then, I have a nephew and, maybe my sister has a boyfriend and maybe his mother lives with my sister, the app would show, those people who still have not voted. So then they would start to try to get out everybody else left in the household. And so we just kept, doing this, over and over again, getting them to turn out people in their network. And so what was, interesting about this was a lot of times, the people who we were hiring, and this was, the intention and the purpose of why we hired people who weren't involved in politics, is because it's a good chance if they're not involved in politics, they also know other people who are not involved in politics too. And this way we could reach more people and expand the electorate, because Reverend Warnock, he won, Senator Warnock, he won outright, pretty handily, but the spread as far as the margin between David Perdue, who was running against Senator Ossoff, was much wider. So John Ossoff, he was down nearly 100,000 votes. I think it was like 90,000 votes at the end of the November cycle. So he had to make up that 90,000 plus get enough over that 90,000. So there wouldn't be another runoff. And so, and he was able to do that. So we had to go and find, again, we had to go and expand the electorate. We couldn't run the same race twice, and we couldn't just count on the same voters in the same coalitions. So I highlighted two people here. Felicia Abrams, she is a nurse, and she worked full time, but she was somewhat engaged here and there through politics via Facebook, but she was hired as a community mobilizer, and she was able to do this work during her free time, when she'd come home in the evening or on the weekends. And Samira, she had never been involved in a campaign before. Samira, she's from a suburb, maybe a couple of hours, outside of Atlanta, and she is Muslim, and she apparently her father was was one of the leaders in their community. And so she just really focused on getting everybody out from the Muslim community center that she attended. And she was able to mobilize 450 people just off of her, contacting people that she knew, and then making sure everybody in their household was voting, and then finding other people within that community. So between the two of them, they were able to mobilize at least 600-700 voters. So again, thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. And then we had, of course, a lot of canvassers and a lot of affinity groups who were working to turn out the vote and knocking on doors, especially because we were up against the pandemic, but there was just a lot of people that you can only reach on the doors. So there were a lot of people out of state, people who came to help us. And again, a lot of affinity groups who really focus on their specific constituents. And so I showed a list of some of these local organizations from the New Georgia Project, Black Voters Matter, Black Men's Voter Project, Asian American Advocacy Fund, the Mahente, Southern Center for Human Rights. So these are all various nonprofit organizations and various political groups who, I don't know if you remember, but there was a website, gasenate.com, that Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight had put out, and anytime you would donate to it, that money would go to Fair Fight, and then it would also, they would split donations between the Warnock and Ossoff campaigns. But one thing that Fair Fight does, if you do donate to Fair Fight, they made sure that they donated money to a lot of these local organizations, and those local organizations really just focused on their base of constituents that they cater to, and made sure that those people turned out to vote. Also, there were a lot of community events here in Atlanta, everything from different barbecue rallies with, barbecue and free food, and a winter coat drive, because we were going into the winter time. So, various nonprofits and organizations would have community events, and, they would have the candidates come there, or they would just, talk about the importance of voting and making sure people were going to vote, but then also doing things to give back to the community as well. And a lot of those organizations I mentioned, put on these events, and they reached out to people, actors and entertainers, because there's a large entertainment base of industry of people here in Atlanta, from hip hop artists and in film. So anyone that they could get to come to these community events, they would come out and support. And then, of course, we did have Fair Fight, Fair Fight being based here. But Fair Fight, what many people don't know is that Fair Fight action, created by Stacey Abrams, but run by Lauren Grow-Wargo. Fair Fight is in over 20 states. And they're not really very, unless you're in that state, they're not really, very forthright on, online, at least telling what they're doing there. But I know they do have a presence in Florida, across all the battleground states. But depending on the state, they might be doing, different efforts in different states. But Fair Fight, they raised $100 million since 2018. And I'm sure it's more, it's over that amount now. But that money, like I said, was spread across at least 18 to 20 battleground states. What a lot of people don't realize is they did a lot of work in 2019 to help win some of the governor's races in, I think it's either Kentucky or Louisiana. It was Kentucky, Louisiana, and Tennessee. They had various races going on there that the Democrats did win. And a lot of that, a lot of that effort in some regards went to Fair Fight, because Fair Fight helped put together legal teams in a lot of these states, and donated money so they could challenge various things in the courts, as far as voting rights and voter suppression laws and things of that nature. So, definitely, keep an eye open for Fair Fight, because they're not only, they're based in Georgia, but they're across the country. And there's many local chapters and student chapters too. And so there was also a push to connect with artists and creatives and innovators during the runoff. Throughout the campaign, but definitely during the runoff. So John Ossoff, he commissioned, he's got, an appreciation for the arts, because he used to be a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker. And so what they did was they commissioned various murals and, paid artists to create these murals across Atlanta, Savannah, and various parts of the state. And what they would do is they would have an unveiling of that mural, and that would be a space where people could come, and see the mural. They would receive, t-shirts and stickers and buttons and things like that. And at some of those events, the candidates would show up to those events so people can take photos with them and post selfies and all of those things. And then it was also a place where the community mobilizers could come and meet one another, or meet the candidate, or just, show up and show their support. So definitely, thank you to all the artists and creatives. It's always great to have them on your side when you're, doing these efforts. And of course, we had a lot of yard signs all over the state. And of course, we know yard signs don't vote, but they were very important in Georgia, because again, a lot of these counties who maybe were red counties or newly Democratic counties, a lot of them didn't have a strong presence regarding the party or the candidates. So these yard signs were, very important, because, they showed a lot of kind of team spirit. And then they showed that, the campaign was reaching out to those rural and those Republican areas where maybe they hadn't really received so much attention. And then, so, a lot of people are asking, okay, so what's next for Georgia? And, I also want to share some things in regards specifically to Broward County in Florida. So one of the main things that's happening right now is that we have to secure voting rights. It really is coming down to the wire. This is probably going to be one of the last months, maybe September, October, where we have an opportunity to secure voting rights. We need both the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which, for those of you who don't know, it's a restoration of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which gave it was pre-clearance was required for a lot of these southern states who had a history of racial violence and discrimination around voting and voter suppression. And so what was required is for them, if they changed or created any laws or changed any laws regarding voting, those states would have to get pre-clearance from the Department of Justice at the federal level. And so in 2013, after President Obama was in office, what ended up happening is that there was a lawsuit, Shelby versus Holder, and that is when the Supreme Court started to strike down various parts of the Voting Rights Act, where now these southern states don't have to get pre-clearance by the Department of Justice at the federal level, so they can just go ahead and make these crazy laws to suppress the vote. So we want to restore the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and we need the For the People's Act. And so the For the People's Act is a separate bill. It was the first 300 pages were drafted by Congressman John Lewis. And he was very much in support of it. And the For the People's Act has things like, automatic, or, same-day voter registration, or the ability to register to vote online, I believe, protecting mail-in voting. So the way Stacey Abrams explains it is that the John Lewis Voting Rights Act helps us going forward, but the For the People's Act helps us now. And it also prevents gerrymandering, because they are, they're getting, the Republicans in many of these states are getting ready to draw new districts for the state, and, they're going to gerrymander. And so that vote's going to be happening later on this year, the vote for the new districts. So the For the People's Act would protect that. Mail-in voting was huge here in Georgia. It was something that, traditionally Republicans tended to do the mail-in voting. And so now that's one of the reasons, they're trying to attack mail-in voting, requiring all kind of crazy ID laws that aren't necessary. And they're using this big lie of voter fraud, and this big lie that, Trump, the election was stolen from him, which is what we saw with the January 6th insurrection. So we need both bills. It's very important that we're calling our senators, because as of now, they're both in the Senate, and both bills. And so, we have to encourage our senators to keep fighting for this. So it doesn't matter if a person's in a blue state, or if their senator is already in support of voting rights, we still have to call them and show that support to them, and let them know that this is extremely important. Because what we saw in Georgia, Florida, Arizona, Texas, North Carolina, all of these Sunbelt states, they are the future of the Democratic Party. The Midwest is trending older, and the Sunbelt is maybe minus Florida, but the rest of the Sunbelt is trending younger, and the demographics are shifting and changing. So those states that I named in the Sunbelt, those are the states that are going to really be in play over the next decade. And, the Republicans are very well aware of that. And so we're just seeing a backlash from a lot of groups, a lot of marginalized groups specifically, who showed up in great numbers to vote. And now we're seeing an attack on voting rights, specifically for those groups in those states. And so the second point I wanted to make is register voters, and then register more voters. So for instance, in Florida, in 2008, there was that little issue with the the DNC and I think it was either Hillary's campaign or something had happened, and the DNC ended up sanctioning Florida and not allowing the campaigns to go into Florida during the primaries. And so if you remember that, so once Barack Obama had secured the nomination that summer, or was on his way to securing the nomination that summer, we were then allowed to come into the state, the campaign officially. So of course there was a lot of grassroots movement and things already happening there, which was, fantastic, but the campaign could not officially come into Florida until June of 2008. So we have from June 2008 to October of 2008 to register as many voters as we could. And I believe it was over 1 million voters that we were able to register during that time. And I'm sure a lot of you were part of that. But the point I'm trying to make is that if we didn't have those voter registration numbers, there was a time a couple of weeks before that voter registration deadline where, the campaign told us, okay, if you all aren't able to, reach our benchmark of our goal, we're going to end up pulling the Florida staff and sending you all to Virginia, to help another state that they were working on flipping. And so I know for me, and my mom, can attest to this, I spent pretty much from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. or 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Every day that summer, standing out in the Walmart parking lot in, I think it was either Plantation or Lauderhill, somewhere around there. And I don't know if you can, do that now, but that was a place where I was able to, register people every day. And it took some time because a lot of people did not always trust, registering to vote on site like that, especially if they weren't really involved in, politics. But they would keep seeing me over and over again. And then eventually they would come over to me. But we just, we went to every corner of anywhere that we could go. I remember the movie Batman came out, and it was like a, big blockbuster summer movie. We would go and stand in line and register voters while we were standing in line. People would go to dance clubs, wherever we could go and find people to register to vote. That's what we would do. And that's what they, did here in Georgia. And that has to be done in Florida. Also partnering and coalition building with marginalized groups that are targeted by voting rights. So again, I don't know all the legality about the clubs and who you guys can partner with and things like that, but definitely building those relationships and, supporting other coalitions who are doing things and, asking for their support and vice versa, extremely important. And then let's see, respect, empower, and include. That was the motto that was used during the Obama campaign, and it still applies today. But as far as looking forward, it's really important to look at the numbers. I wish I had Florida's numbers in front of me, but looking at the numbers of who came out to vote and where, and thinking about who do you need to create this new Florida coalition. And that's what, right now in Texas, Beto O'Rourke, his Powered by the People, they've been out aggressively registering voters. And, we can't just keep, just playing to the same groups and the same voters and the same people. We have to get, outside the box and find new people and to expand that electorate. And in regards to Florida, I would say throw out the old playbook when it comes to electing Val Demings for Senate, because sometimes I'm hearing, different pundits and just people, weighing in about Val Demings and how she's going to win, or what she needs to do to win. And, Val Demings is going to be in a unique position as a woman and as a Black woman. So there's going to be certain things that she'll be at a deficit at because of that. But then there's also things that she's going to be at an advantage because of her, of her identity. And so that's going to be really important because I keep hearing people, kind of say the same old things, in Florida about who we need to get out and who we need to focus on. And there is like this hyper focus about trying to get people back, who supported Obama in 2008 or who flipped and, came back. I would really strongly advise, if those people want to come back, they will. Of course, you have to reach out to, everyone, but it really needs to be a focusing on who can we bring in who were not participating. And so I know for a fact, like the Jacksonville vote and some of the areas, up north in Florida, in terms of Black voters, that vote has not been maximized in Florida. Young people, that vote has not been maximized. Even around the Orlando area, a lot of people are constantly talking about the Cuban vote in South Florida, but there's a lot of Hispanic and Latino voters in Orlando and some of those areas that need to be brought in. And so again, going back to that respect, empower, and include, if you respect those voters and their voice and listen to them, and not just come to them and tell them how horrible DeSantis is, or tell them how horrible the Republicans are, but listening to them and including and listening to their issues and including their issues in whatever your platform is, and then empowering them, because oftentimes people will go in and listen to what people are saying, sharing information, but then they're not empowering them. So empowering can come through funding certain organizations or certain groups who maybe have a specific voting demographic that you all need, or supporting their events, or empowering people through trainings and giving them information and showing them how campaigns are run and how you're able, what you're able to do in your community. All of that helps. So I just highly encourage, and I haven't had a chance to speak directly to anyone in the Val Demings campaign yet, but definitely I just feel like whatever kind of has been done in the last 10 years, if pay attention to what worked, but then we have to get outside the box and do something different, because she's a very unique candidate, and we haven't had a Black woman senator from the state of Florida yet. So we need to, play into her strengths. And I know there's going to be a lot of attention nationally from, a lot of women and various groups when it comes to Florida in that seat. So, so again, even if it's as far as people that are being hired and things like that, I hope that there's going to be a more open mind to bring different kind of people in to the fold, and not just kind of staying in a comfort zone, going back to the same people who've been running a lot of these elections in the state, and who may or may not have had success in getting the results that we needed. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and afterwards I'll place some links in the chat and from various things I talked about, and I'll also leave my email if anyone has any questions, or if you want me to share this presentation with any other groups, I'm more than happy to. But I'm finished with the presentation, and I'll just open it up to questions. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not finished. Sorry. One more thing. I just added these 2 slides. So I started if you're on Facebook, I started a Facebook Live show this past August. And my goal was just to keep people engaged, because some people have, checked out, and rightfully so, because a lot of people, and I'm sure all of you, have been, first of all, just traumatized by Trump's, presidency, since 2016. And then, working on the midterms in 2018, and then the lead up. I mean, the primary was, so many people running. It was a crazy primary in 2019. And then it was the presidential election, and then the runoff, all during the, a pandemic. So a lot of people did need to step back and take a break and take a breather. So I highly encourage people to do that, because we're really going to be in for a fight next year. And even at, at the local level, everything that's, as far as the upcoming elections this year. But so I started this Facebook Live show in August in order to keep people engaged and to keep getting information out there that's credible and verified, because there's so much disinformation and misinformation out there on so many different topics. And I wanted to just elevate and highlight voices in the grassroots groups and communities of people who are, doing a lot of hard work, like all of you are. So, so this Facebook Live group, or not the group, but the show is called Grassroots Voices with Robyn and Friends, where community and politics meet. And I think I'm on show 6, and we've had guests each week for the month of August and September, and I'm going to continue through the rest of the year. But if anyone is interested in seeing that show, it's on YouTube, and also I host the show through our Team Stacey Abrams grassroots group. So if you're on Facebook, it's Team Stacey Abrams Grassroots. Join. Please answer the security questions if possible, just so we can make sure you're a real person and not a robot or a bad actor, which we do get people trying to join the groups. But you can join that group, and it's a great group. We mostly post about voting rights in not just in Georgia, but across the country. And we, sometimes focus on various social justice issues. And we also focus on making sure that the Democrats are going to win the midterms. And so, if you join the group, I have my Grassroots Voices show that runs through the group. But it's also a great way to just see what other people are doing and what other organizations are doing. And that way you can get some ideas for how to maybe do some of those things in Florida, or just seeing what's been working in other places. So we kind of focus on Georgia, Texas, Florida sometimes, Arizona sometimes, most of the Sunbelt states. But we have over 25,000 people in this group. A lot of them came in during the runoffs, and we anticipate the group growing once, hopefully, fingers crossed, that Stacey announces that she'll run for governor, and then supporting Senator Warnock and Val Demings as well. So I think I'm finished at this point. And yes, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to stick around and answer them.